we were pissing neon green every day.
The big ball of heat in the sky was too much.
I thought there was a bear.
Reality goes, yeah, fresco. That's what I'm saying.
Hey, everybody. What's up, everybody?
Welcome to
Welcome to
StouryTime.
StouryTime.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Storytime with John and Friends. I'm your host, John. Today, we have another great guest for you. You may recognize him from playing lead guitar in the band Sugarcult. Please welcome Marko DeSantis.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks so much for being on, Marko. It's an honor.
Oh, man. It's, you're getting me out of doing a whole bunch of things I was supposed to get done today. So you gave me a really good excuse to put stuff off, which
Nice.
I love. Thank you.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell the people a little bit about yourself?
So my name is Marko DeSantis. I'm from California. It's from Santa Barbara, California, but I live in Los Angeles, and I play guitar in a band called Sugarcult that we started back in 1999 in Santa Barbara. And we're not really like that active anymore, but this year is kind of an important year because it's the 20th anniversary of our second record, Palm Trees and Power Lines, which had the song Memory on it, which a lot of people know. And 2004, it's the 20th anniversary of a lot of cool stuff. We did the Warped Tour in 2004. We put out that record. We got to tour with Green Day on their American Idiot tour, which also came out in 2004, which is wild because I'm going to see them next month, and they're celebrating the 20th anniversary of that record.
That's wild.
And and I also some people who are deep divers of music geekdom might know that I also have a project called Bad Astrinaut with Joey Cape from Lagwagon that I've done, probably since about around the time Sugarcult started, but we sort of just did it in the spaces in between and been involved in a whole bunch of stuff. Millions of different short-lived bands before and after and during and all that good stuff. So yeah. Just awesome. Kind of a music weirdo from California.
I love that. I actually did, I did know that you played in Bad Astronaut. And one of my questions I wanted to ask you, I'll just jump right in, I guess, was what was it like? Like you guys played out during the Sugarcult days or?
No. Bad Astronaut, it's really, it's sort of. I mean, there was probably a little bit of crossover, but Bad Astronaut has we have kind of a funny distinction of having played our first show almost exactly 10 years after our first record came out. So the project was initially conceived over some adult beverages between myself and Joey Cape and our original drummer, Derek Plord, who is unfortunately no longer with us. And the three of us were just friends, from Santa Barbara. Derek and I grew up in the same neighborhood, started playing music together in our first band ever. And then Joey was kind of the sort of cool older kid that would let us hang out with him every once in a while. And then we all grew up and became buddies. And Joey and Derek had become really good friends because they played in Lagwagon together first few records. And I had started out playing in a band with Derek when I was a little kid. And then we also played in a band for a little while called the Ataris, back when the Ataris was a three-piece. It was me on bass, Derek on drums, and Chris on guitar and vocals. And so we all just had this weird, woven history. And for those of you who have been to Santa Barbara, it's a small town. I mean, it's just kind of this weird little town between the beach and the mountains. And it's just big enough to be considered a city, but it feels kind of like a little village. And when you're kind of a music outsider in a small town, you very quickly, you find this really small. You form a community, and it's a very tight knit community because you're just basically any kid that doesn't fit in anywhere else gets invited to join the the thing. We're kind of like that. We were just sort of the dumpster pile for anyone who didn't fit in anywhere. So you get little arts kids and skaters and punk rockers and metal kids and just all manner of outsiders. And we all grew up together in this small town. And so for us, it was kind of Joey and Derek had experienced a modicum of success and touring, and I was starting to get really busy. Sugarcult was starting to get pretty serious. And we were all just kind of drinking and talking about how don't you miss the good old days when we used to just get together with a 12 pack and make up songs in a sweaty room and in between telling jokes and messing around. And we just kind of had the idea to get back to that. And we said, let's get together and bring some stuff that doesn't really fit for our other bands. And Joey had been writing a lot of stuff that he didn't feel was appropriate for Lagwagon's vibe. And we were all just like, huge music fans that just bonded over all different types of music. A lot of people have the misconception that people and I hope I'm not breaking anyone's hearts or pulling the, ruining the fantasy, but like, as it turns out, people in the bands you love don't go home and listen to bands that sound like them necessarily.
Right.
Like all me and Joey would ever talk about was how much we loved Elliott Smith. And neither of our bands sounded remotely like Elliott Smith, I noticed that with a lot of bands. I remember reading when I was a kid, the first thing that kind of opened that idea up to me was, I think I was reading an interview with James Hetfield from Metallica. And, I just expected him to say like, oh, the other bands I love are Anthrax and Slayer and maybe like Motorhead. And he was like, yeah, I love Tom Waits and James Taylor and Elton John. And you're like, and maybe
opposite sides of the spectrum.
Yeah. And you're like, how does that happen? But then it makes sense once you grow up a little bit, you realize like, no wonder he's such a good songwriter, because he's growing up listening to these amazing songwriters and lyricists, but then he's, expressing it with this like heavy thrash metal vibe. But what always differentiated Metallica from all the other sort of bands that were lumped in with their genre is that they really had songs.
Okay.
It wasn't just the drum beat and the guitar tone and the aggressive sounding vocals. It was like you could take any one of those songs and play it on an acoustic guitar at a campfire, half drunk with a broken guitar string, and you could still tell it's a good song. And I will say, that's one thing I've always really looked up to Joey Cape as. I mean, he's a friend of mine, but I always really looked up to him as an artist. In that I feel like he's kind of got that same thing where Lagwagon gets kind of thrown in with this whole like 90s punk, blah, blah, blah thing. But like, there's a songwriter there. And it's like, and I mean, he goes out and does those acoustic things, and that's where you can really hear what I'm talking about. There's really good songs. Like you could play that stuff for your parents that don't know anything about Lagwagon or No Effects or anything. And they would be like, oh my God, these are great songs. And they would have no idea that it was a guy who's, who people identify as a punk rock singer, and maybe the same could be said for Tony Sly and a lot of people. Anyways, I'm rambling, but
you're fine.
The point is, Bad Astronaut sort of just started as this like excuse for us to indulge some other, just some other musical adventures and paths, and mostly just an excuse to hang out with old friends. And we made this like mandate, like because our other bands were so quote unquote serious and pro-minded, we were like, let's just not do photo shoots. Let's not make merch. Let's not play shows. Let's just make this like, this is such an obnoxious thing to say, but like our sort of spirit animal when we were doing that project was like Sgt. Pepper's by the Beatles. And like Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys, where you're like, these are records that historically you hear were like made after the band's touring lives were over, and they just like basically used the recording studio as their instrument. And the songs weren't beholden to needing to like be able to be played live or be particularly like entertaining live. So it was more just like, let's go in the studio with these ideas and like kind of just go crazy and see what happens. And we don't have to worry about selling t-shirts or playing shows. I love playing shows and I love t-shirts and all that stuff, but like, this was just we were like, if we're going to do this, let's not go run it through the same process as our other primary bands.
Right. It's more of like a musical outlet opposed to a business. So like the business side.
Well, that would preclude that our other things were business outlets, and they aren't. I think every band starts out as a labor of love.
Yeah, for sure.
And then if and when it gets, starts to do business, like people pay you to play shows, or someone gives you money to make a record, and you know, you make merchandise that you need to sell, and, you know, then it definitely can, it makes sense at some point. It makes sense to become a business.
Mhm.
But but I hope that, you know, I hope that no bands start out as businesses.
Absolutely. I agree.
If
I
they
don't think
do, I
anyone
wanna
really
know.
does. I mean,
But yeah,
I
I
shouldn't
think
say no one does, but you know,
yeah,
I would say most don't.
yeah.
That's interesting. So are you guys still releasing music? Because I did see you guys. Your most recent release was like 2021, I believe. Was
Bad
that was just a
Astronaut.
single?
Yeah, like during the pandemic, we did the classic thing where we're like all like, you know, missing our friends and doing like Zoom calls, and we just kind of were like, hey, let's throw some files around, like, you know, so we like recorded it without being in the same room as each
Mhm.
other, you know, which was kind of cool. That was the main idea with that, was to put a song on this, because Fat Records put out all our music, and they wanted to do kind of a vinyl box set, which
Okay.
was you know, pretty cool. It was like, you know, because a lot of, I think only, I'm probably getting this wrong, but I think only one of our records had ever been released on vinyl. That would have been the first one, Acrophobe. I don't think the two other Bad Astronaut records ever got released on vinyl. And correct me if I'm wrong, internet. But so the idea was to put them all on limited edition vinyl, and then we were like, Joey found this like unfinished track from before, and we finished that, and then we've had a brand new one that actually the keyboard player Todd had co-written with Joey. So that's on there too. It's like a little 7-inch that's included in the box set. So, and
Okay.
I'm
Very cool.
pretty sure you can find it online too with streaming. I'm not sure. I'm you're not getting any good information from me. You got to talk to the people at Fat.
Very cool.
But yeah, but you know, again, it's one of those things. There's no schedule. There's no like. It's not like we rehearse every week or something. It's just kind of this like group of friends, and once in a while we fired up. And the idea of playing shows was completely off the table. And then one day after Derek had died, our drummer, we like just like we were like, why don't we just try to play some shows? And we got the idea to go and do some shows, and we got our friend to fill in for Derek, and it was super fun. And we did some shows in California, and then we did some shows. We got this tour to go do some shows in Canada, mostly in Montreal, Quebec, that area. Like, so plays a bunch of shows in Eastern Canada, and then like maybe a couple years after that, we got this random like sort of traveling festival opportunity in Australia, which was pretty amazing because we got to tour with, like, so random, but Black Flag was on
Oh
it.
wow.
Black Flag reuniting with Ron Reyes,
Wow.
who, you know, people would call Chavo. He's I believe the second singer of Black Flag after Keith Morris. So a lot of
Mhm.
people, you know, he hadn't played in the band in a long time. So it was kind of fun. And incidentally, on that tour, here's a tour story for you. We're on that tour in Australia with Black Flag, and the Ataris were supposed to be on it, but their singer, Chris, had been going through a real like bout of being, you know, of like fear of flying. So he just didn't show up to Australia, but the whole band showed up, but not him. So like they ended up not playing, but before all the guys flew back, they did like a dive bar show, and like just kind of did the Ataris karaoke, and like I got up and sang a song with them. A bunch of people from the tour got up and sang a song with them. So they could at least say they played one show in Australia.
That's
But
awesome.
but the crazy thing about that tour was, well, there's a few crazy things about that tour, but I will be a good sport and not get too into it. But Black Flag, Greg from Black Flag had a side project. I can't remember what they were called, but it was basically like him and the rhythm section that he had for Black Flag, and then their tour manager, who at the time was randomly the skate legend Mike Vallely.
Okay.
And, you know, so it was like, hey, Black Flag, or their tour manager's Mike Vallely. And they have this like other project, and they were like opening the shows. And then later on, Black Flag would be that big headliner, and Ron would be the singer. Okay. Well, on the last day of the tour, it was probably about a week, maybe a 10-day tour. And we were in Perth, which is like on the opposite end of, you know, the far end of Australia. And we're like, you know, usually hang out. All the bands got along really good. It was like, I think No Fun at All was on it. Boy Sets Fire was on it. It was like a bunch of bands, and it was just a great vibe. Everyone was having fun hanging out. And at some point, I don't know, maybe I followed Joey outside because he wanted to have a cigarette or something. And we were just outside and Black Flag was playing and you could still hear the murmur of their set going on. And we didn't really think anything of it. We had watched the first couple songs. We walk outside and they're still playing. And all of a sudden we see Ron walking towards us. And we're like, aren't you supposed to be on stage singing right now? Like your band's, and he's like, oh, guess I'm out of the band. We're like, what do you mean? He's like, Mike just came out on stage and tapped me on the shoulder and grabbed the microphone out of my hand and said, you're done. And I'm the singer now. And he's been the singer ever since.
Wow. That's wild.
That's how you have to fight your way in and out of Black Flag.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's the tradition. Yeah.
That is absolutely crazy. What's it like playing in Australia?
It's a trip, man. But I will say, like, I'm just thinking about it now. That must have been the most, because it's a long flight. I don't know where you are in the world, but we're in California. It's like a good 17-hour flight to Australia.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking how awkward that flight home must have been. They're all like sitting next to each other on the plane, just all
on the same flight. Yeah, that's funny. I didn't think of that.
Yeah. No, it's a trip in Australia because it's like, when you're past the international date line, you're past the equator, like you're so far away. You're just, that's why they call it down under. You were just on the other side of the planet. And the jet lag, you never really get used to the jet lag. It's just like, it's so intense. You just constantly feel like you're just in like a daze, but it's beautiful down there. I love Australia. The way that I've been there, I've toured there twice, once with Sugarcult and once with Bad Astrinaut. And the way they usually do it, because of the way the cities are spread out, is you'll like, they'll have these like festival tours and you'll play, and then the crew and all this, the gear will start driving to the next show through the night, and you'll stay in a hotel or whatever, and then you'll fly the next day. So it's like it's super fun because you're flying commercial, but like everybody, like there's like so it'd be like a row of seats that's like Sugarcult. The right behind us is Alkaline Trio. Right behind them is like, Incubus. Right behind them is, so it's like all the bands, and we're just on a whole airplane. And it was like that with both of the tours. So that's a trip. It's kind of feels like you're on vacation because you have time because you're flying. So you're not like spending all your time driving. So we're like going to like places where you can have like encounters with kangaroos and koalas, and we're going to the beach every day. And like, it's just amazing. It's like, you really have to remind yourself that you're technically there to be working.
Right. Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. Yeah. It's expensive. I remember the value of the dollar was really like, it was like you go get a cup of coffee and it was like $8,
Wow.
It wasn't like $8 like hipster coffee. It was just like literally just some like ordinary cup of coffee. Remember that. And people really like to party. Like the bars are open super late. And I mean, dude, it's amazing, dude. It's like if California in the 60s had a baby with like England, it's just like, it's kind of this weird hybrid of British culture and like surf California beach culture. But yet it feels like it just has this, like, everyone just seemed like they're in a good mood. And like the government, from what I could tell, and I'm sure there's, when you're an outsider looking in, it's probably the grass is always greener, but like, it just seemed like they were like supportive of the arts. Like they had a ministry of culture, and they, like if you want to be an actor or a musician, there's all these festivals, and they're like paid for by the government. There's all these endowments for music and arts. And it just seems like a really cool place to live. Like if I ever just wanted to totally hit the reset button, I would probably go to Australia.
Yeah, that's awesome. To get support from your government to do the arts is crazy. I mean, I have a friend of mine was playing in that band. I don't know if you ever heard of them, but they're called Counterparts. They're like a heavy metal hardcore band.
No, I've never heard of them.
But they're from Canada, and I'm from Buffalo, New York. Okay. So it's just literally, a 5-minute drive to Canada from here. But he was their touring bassist, and he was in the band, and he would say, like, when they would tour, their government gives everybody in the band, like, I'm probably wrong here, but I'm pretty sure he said like each person in the band gets $2,000.
That's amazing.
That's insane.
Awesome.
Could you imagine like
I
the
know.
struggling artists in America would, I'd still be doing it.
I mean, it just seems like that's so awesome because, I don't know. It's like a country's heritage is their artistic output, and to the idea of like if someone wants to play music or be a novelist or be a playwright or anything like that, that shouldn't have to be this like you're either starving or you're barely getting by unless you're a superstar. You know what I
Right.
mean? There should be some kind of dignified way to encourage people, and it's not like everyone's just going to jump on the bandwagon and be an artist. They can get a free handout. It's like you're going to demonstrate that you're willing to go play shows. You're willing to, you're making records, you're doing things. You're not just sitting back and like identifying as an artist and getting paid. But like I just feel like there should be something like that because it really is something they should encourage,
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. I do want to touch base here on Sugarcult a little bit because with the 20 years of the record and everything, what does it feel like to have written a song that was like such a big part of the emo movement in the early 2000s that played such a big role? Like, what does that feel like as a musician?
I mean, yeah, it's a trip. It's like we didn't, I know it sounds like I'm just saying it, but like none of this stuff it's like you don't really plan it, You just do what you do. And I mean, we didn't even know people in the pop punk and emo world were going to like our band. We
Right.
we weren't designed to be anything more than just we didn't really think it through that far. And like, when I was growing up, it was pretty like sectarian in the music world. Like people had to identify as like they're hardcore or they're street punk or they're ska or they're, metal or they're, glam or they're this or they're that. And like, I think after like somewhere along the way in the 90s, that just sort of exploded and everything just sort of became a lot more. I saw this, you start to see the things become a little bit more inclusive and integrated and just like whatever. And it just wasn't this like, it wasn't like, let's put an ad in the paper saying, trying to start a pop punk band or emo, it was mostly just like me and our singer got together and connected on like just liking stuff that had like, we liked, a lot of like alternative music, like the Foo Fighters and Nirvana and Weezer and Oasis, stuff that would be on the alternative radio. But then we, also I came from having grown up in a pretty like big punk scene. So I played in a lot of punk bands, I guess. And I was just so bored of that world because I always felt like I was like kind of 15 minutes late. Like I was just a little bit younger and like it just seemed like it had run its course. And I was like, we were just like kids trying to like imitate what came before us,
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to, like I said, I played in the Ataris for a little while. I toured in the Swingin' Utters for a while, which was an amazing experience. But again, I just felt like this is someone else's world that I'm like getting invited into, and it's wonderful, but it's, I didn't start it,
Right.
So I was always interested, very, very much like kind of just a history buff, always been interested in like learning about the roots of the artists that I like. Like I'll just like read an interview and find out what they like and then go to the record store and buy that record and check it out and then sort of keep going with that. It's like I would call it cultural anthropology. Like you're just like, you find out what this band listened to, go back and buy that record, and then find out what that record, what they listen to, and go back and buy that. I mean, it's fun to do that now because with streaming, it's so much easier to do that. You don't have to actually go to a record store and buy stuff. But like, it's just so fascinating to sort of connect the dots of this unbroken chain of music history and see how it all sort of mutates and it's because of technology, because of culture, because of context, because of just sort of happenstance of different people being together. And, it's like, it's so interesting,
Mm-hmm.
And so around the time of Sugarcult, I was kind of feeling like, okay, I'm a little bit bored with like punk rock, and it just didn't feel as free as I wished it was. It felt a little codified, the way that, this is how you're supposed to dress, this is how you're supposed to sound, this is the label you're supposed to be on. It just all felt so organized, and I thought the whole point of punk rock was freedom.
Mhm.
And I was a little bit bored of that. And I'd been in a sort of power pop type of band in the earlier in the 90s called Popsico, which actually we just re-released that record like maybe a year or two ago on vinyl. And that was a cool band. And it was like, more like Replacements and Teenage Fan Club and stuff like that. Like that was more like where we were coming from.
You guys actually gave me more of like almost like a early Goo Goo Dolls kind of sound vibe too. You know what I mean?
And how I would describe the Goo Goo Dolls when I first heard them was, this band reminds me of a poppier version of the Replacements.
Right. Yeah.
It's so
sure.
that's appropriate, and so I had that, and just always had a love of like what people kind of refer to as power pop, which is kind of a catch-all for like anything melodic and guitar based. And I would probably consider Weezer a power pop band, but there's certain bands that just get to a certain stature and they just transcend genre. Like you don't call the Chili Peppers a funk band anymore. You just call them the Chili Peppers,
Yeah.
You don't call Pearl Jam a grunge band. You just call them Pearl Jam, Anyway, so it was just like me and our singer from Sugarcult, Tim, he grew up like listening to like, Green Day and Nirvana and everything. And around the time I met him, we were just geeking out on like, I was really geeking out on like Elvis Costello and like the Cars and Nick Lowe and, a lot of that kind of like skinny tie, early 80s vibe. The Romantics, the Knack, it's like just keep finding these little like segments of history and then you get into it and go, oh my God, there's like some good shit here, especially if it's like a band that had like one hit on the radio. And you're like, wait, we got to go in there and like listen to the record that came after that flopped and then caused them to get dropped or whatever. And you find so much buried treasure out there because there's so many great bands. There was a band in the 90s that we really bonded on called Super Drag that they're from Tennessee. Yeah. Do you know them?
They sound familiar.
Yeah, they were like a one-hit wonder in the 90s. They had a song called Who Sucked Out the Feeling.
Okay.
And that was like kind of, to be totally honest, like that was probably like the blueprint for Sugarcult when we first started. We were like, dude, we got to have a band like Super Drag. Like they looked cool. They were like angry, but they were poppy and melodic, had really cool stuff. And and then we just sort of kind of kept mutating and getting a little bit better and getting a little bit rawer and getting a little bit faster and getting, and like I said, I'd started on guitar when I was a kid and then switched to bass for years. And then when I met Tim and those guys, they already had a bass player lined up, this guy, Aaron. So Tim really wanted me to play with him. So he was just like, dude, do you want to play guitar? And I was like, sure. It just sounds like fun because I've been playing bass. So to be totally honest, at the time I was kind of over it just in general. I was like, I've played in so many bands and we've gotten like, Popsico, like bands that just almost pulled it, but then just missed, didn't, just something happened. Like in Popsico's case, it was our singer unfortunately died in a car accident.
Oh, wow.
But he had gotten really strung out on drugs and it was kind of, he was tempting fate. So, I mean, it's sad no matter what, but it was one of those things where you're like, so it took me a while to pick up the pieces after that band and then just trying bands and it just, nothing seemed to stick. Nothing seemed to work for a long time. And like I said, I did some gigs where I was like filling in the Ataris, filling in Nerf Herder, filling in the Swing Editors, but nothing where I had that like pride of ownership. So around the time I met those guys, it was like kind of like the weird like moment where I was probably just about ready to like call it a day with like, and just maybe try something different. And, that's when it happened. So it was like, I met these guys, they wanted me to play guitar and that sort of drew me in because it was like, oh, that sounds like fun. And me and the singer got along really well. And then once I started jamming with them, I realized that they had what I was missing from a lot of the bands that I had been tinkering around with locally. And that's that they had the same kind of like, just, I don't know, work ethic and just desire to do whatever it takes, you know?
Right.
And I was always the guy in all my bands that was that guy, you know, and there'd be other guys, especially in a small town where they're just like, yeah, dude, I promised my girlfriend I'd watch Friends with her tonight. And you're like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, you know, like it just still to this day, like I can't comprehend how anything could be more important to somebody than like doing something like if you're in a band. Like, why wouldn't you not want to run the set one? Oh, dude, we gotta go because it's almost last call. And you're like, what are you talking about, dude? You know, like there would be so many times like where you just you run up against the thing where and it's amazing musicians too, like really talented people, but they were just like in a small town the mentality was just like, dude, get real. We're not gonna like make it big or anything. We're just doing this as kind of a hobby for fun on the side, you know. And I don't know why, for me, it just like I was just like, no way, man. Like I want to run this thing all the way like into the end zone. Like, let's go, you know?
Absolutely.
And when I met those guys, they sort of had that same attitude. I mean, in a way, it was like almost like healthy competition. It was like who could be the most into it and the most driven. We'd like be like, you know, sort of like, you know how much, you know what I did for the band today, you know? And they'd be like, oh yeah, well, I made stickers. Oh yeah, well, I ordered t-shirts. Oh yeah, well, I booked us a show. Oh yeah, well, I made flyers and went out and put them up all over town, you know? Oh yeah, well, I wrote a new song, you know, like it was kind of like one-upping each other. And then if we messed up, we would just like, you know, be like military about it. Be like, all right, we got to run the whole set again now, or we got to try it in the dark, or we got to do push-ups. Like it was like really hardcore.
Yeah.
And it was just the four of us. And then things just started to grow. It was like you'd play every show we could get, and it just started to grow locally. And then we'd start to play some shows in LA, and that would start to happen. And then like kind of the word just kind of got out. And I guess forgot to answer your question here, but like I'll get back to it about memory.
Yep.
It's just from the start, that was kind of our thing. We didn't really know where we fit in. We were just like kind of outcasts in our hometown, you know, kind of outcast within the punk scene, you know, like Fat Mike, I'd play him the music and he'd be like, I don't like the slow songs, but I love the band. The songs are good, but I don't like the slow songs. So I knew like Fat actually wanted to put some of our music out, but we were like, well, you know, I don't know if that's the home for this band. And we just kept looking, and eventually we just found this random label that kind of found us, and they didn't really have anything to say for themselves, but they had really good infrastructure and they had good distribution and they had good money, and they also just really believed in us, and they were willing to, this is probably the most important thing, they were willing to get out of our way and let us do it, because we were really kind of like control freaks. Like we knew exactly how we wanted to sound, how we wanted to look, how we wanted to be marketed, how we wanted our logo to look, how we wanted the artwork to be, you know, like the label, we just needed a label to support us, you know? So we found this label and we put the first record out, Start Static, that I see you have right by your skateboard there.
Yes, sir.
And that record kind of like, it took a long time, and then it just like kind of blew up eventually. It had this song Bouncing Off the Walls on it that became pretty big. And then we, you know, we toured for about 3.5 years on that record. And then while we were working on our second record, Palm Trees and Power Lines, that record, Start Static, got released again. It got released overseas. So it got released on Epitaph Records in Europe, and then it got released on a label in Japan called Avex. And so they made different album covers for it. We added some different bonus tracks, and we would like have to go over to Europe and to Japan to promote the record and like do press for it, play festivals, play shows. Meanwhile, we're back home working on Palm Trees and Power Lines. And so it was, I think the cool thing about Memory is that it was like, it's probably the first song we wrote for Palm Trees. It was probably it was in the first like batch of songs we wrote. And so we were able to, before we recorded it, we were able to try it out, like put it into our set in Europe, like just sneak it between Stuck in America and Pretty Girl, or like two songs people already knew. It's sort of like, we got the feeling from like right away, like there's something about this song that really connects with people. And because you never know, you write songs, you don't know which one's going to be the one. Like the last song we thought was going to be big on our first record was Bouncing Off the Walls, and it turned out to like be our, you know, one of our biggest hits. So like you just never really know. That's the sort of democracy of music, is like it's ultimately the people that get to decide um, whether, what works and what doesn't work. And people really responded to Memory, even though they had never heard it before. They're just at a live show in Japan, jumping up and down, and then they kept jumping up and down. We're like, well, okay, this song seems to really like work. And then we recorded it, and I feel like we captured it well. And Yeah, and then it was kind of a no-brainer. We were like, that's got to be the single off of Palm Trees and Power Lines. Like, it's the first song we wrote for the record. It's the one, we've already tried it out in front of people and feels like it's, and so we put it out, and it kind of, I think it's also just the time period, because if you think about like 20 years ago when that song was first released, that's when this moment was really starting to come to a boil that we had sort of watched happen, because we did the Warped Tour 2001, 2002, and 2004, and you just watched these, like, you just watched it happen. In 2001, you saw like Blink 182 was like peaking, they were getting so big, and all these other bands that sort of followed in their wake or got signed in their wake, like Sum 41 and Newfound Glory and Simple Plan and Good Charlotte and all these bands. I'd seen it a few years earlier. I'd seen it with like MXPX,
right,
and obviously with Green Day. And then there were certainly like indications that something was happening, and then there was Jimmy World in 2001, that Bleed American record. But if you remember, Lucky Denver Mint had come out the record cycle before that, and that was getting, so there was a lot of little like little glimmers that something was happening in music that was gonna let break away from the music of the day, which at the turn of the century was like Limp Bizkit. It was like new metal was the big thing, and like
That
Britney
Korn
Spears,
and,
Limp Bizkit, Korn, and like in the rock world, and then a lot of those sort of like latter day grunge, like sort of grunge light, like like the Creeds and stuff like that, and Collective Souls, were like that. It was just, to me, in my never to be humble opinion, it was like the late 90s was kind of whack, like in the commercial music world. So like it really forced us all to dive back underground. And that's just always been my, like, I mean, I have no problem with like mainstream pop music, but I always want to stay connected to the underground, and the underground is where the really, really fascinating ideas are, because they're not as, I don't know. It's just, to me, the late 90s was a really good time to go back underground. And, you find there was so much cool stuff in the underground. I mean, I remember finding the White Stripes when they were just on, In the Red. And then, they would like, come to fruition in the early 2000s. But, you saw things that were like, and even before the White Stripes, you got into John Spencer Blues Explosion, and you saw like, okay, this is not going to probably be that big, but this could light somebody's fuse that could become, and I didn't think the White Stripes were going to become as mainstream as they did. And it was remarkable when that happened. But anyway, it's just super fun to see what was happening. And we started our band in 99. So we were like, kind of our MO was like, let's start the band we wish existed.
Right. Yeah. And it shines through too, because you guys, like, the music that you guys released and wrote, it's timeless. It's not nostalgic. Like when you're at, they do like punk rock karaoke downtown in downtown Buffalo, like, once a week or whatever, or a couple times a month. And when those songs, Memory and Bouncing Off the Walls, if those songs come on, it's like, everyone is just like singing as loud as they can. You know what I mean? It's not it's not like a nostalgic thing. I feel like it's more timeless. You wrote music that for years to come, when it comes on, people are going to, love this music because it's so catchy. It's got that poppy feel to it, but it's got that, a little bit heavier feel at times. And I don't know, it's just like, it's timeless is what I would call it.
Thank you. I mean, that's incredible to hear. I mean, it still blows my mind. Like and I'm not just trying to be like, I'm not just trying to be humble. Like, I literally, it blows my mind just being a dude from Santa Barbara, that someone in Buffalo, that anybody in Buffalo knows about our band at all, and then can sing along to our songs on a Friday night or something like that, or, or whatever it is. Like, that is just like, you never get used to that. It's so weird. It's one thing when you're touring and you're like, okay, we're going somewhere where it's like people who want to see us have come out of the woodwork and they're coming to see us play and they have our records. It's another thing when you're just at some like emo night or karaoke night or whatever it might be, and this song comes on and people know it. That's wild. I mean, that's just wild for anything, regardless of what genre you get lumped into. It's just, to me, that's one of the coolest things about being in a band that that had, you know, a couple songs that kind of broke into the world. It's just like you kind of feel like, wow, okay, we, in some little small way, you know, we're certainly not the Beatles or Bruce Springsteen, but like in some little small way, like some little thing we did is, you know, has affected a lot of lives out there, and still kind of lives on. It's cool. I wish we could go out and play those songs, you know, for people, but our singer, unfortunately, is just not, he's not able to tour right now because he's got some really severe like ear issues and stuff. So, I mean, it's not like there's like bad blood. It's not like we hate our fans or we hate the band or we don't want to play. It's just that, you know, in order to do it, we would probably have to do it without him. And that's a hard thing to get used to for us as the band. And probably it's a hard thing to ask of our fans to accept. But, you know, not completely ruling it out. You know, you're probably the first person I've said that to in public, but it's like, I just look at like from what you just said, it's like your songs become bigger than any one of us. Our songs are our legacy. And it's like, if there's people out there that want to come to sing along, I mean, it's funny. This first popped in my head because, obviously there's all this stuff that we're aware of, you know, I'll go DJ like these emo nights and, you know, you know, when we were young festival and all this, there's so much excitement about that era that we got to be part of somehow. There's so much renewed excitement about it. And we just kind of were like, you know, it's not so much the like cash grab that there might be. It's more like this is kind of wild to think that right now, for some reason, people are interested in this again. And maybe 10 years from now, they won't be. Maybe 5 years from now, they won't be. You know, maybe 1 year from now, they won't be. So you're kind of like, this is kind of an opportunity. And the next time this opportunity comes around again, we might be like in our 70s. You know what I mean?
Right,
we might be too old to do it, or God willing, we're even still around. You know, so it's like one of those things where you go, I don't know, man. Maybe we'll check it out.
You could you could do like the maybe not the exact same thing, but like Blink had Matt Skiba singing with them for a while. You know, they wanted to get out and play shows before Tom came back, and I know it's not the same, but I'm sure a lot of people would love to see you guys. So
yeah, well, it occurred to me because I'm a huge Ramones fan, and recently Marky Ramone came through LA, and I went to the show. I was like, you know, I don't even care if it's good or not. I just want to like go to the thing that's like someone from the Ramones is going to be at, and I just want to go there and just kind of like go to the Church of the Ramones and worship, you know, just like check it out.
Yeah.
And he comes out and he's got 3 guys from Argentina fronting the band, you know, on guitar, bass, and vocals. And they look cool. They're wearing leather jackets. They, you know, they're certainly not the Ramones, but they played 2.5 hours of Ramones songs with Marky playing drums, and it was a sold out show, and it was loud, and it was just awesome. You know, you had a couple beers your friends and you're just like, dude, this is like, we're just celebrating the Ramones. Yeah, I wish it was Dee Dee and Joey and Johnny up there, but they're not around anymore. So like this is just the way you can celebrate the Ramones, and it made sense to me. I was like, this is okay, you know, like so anyways, we'll see I
that would be very cool.
False hope.
Fingers crossed. Fingers
crossed. No, it's I really appreciate you said that, because that was, like I said, you know, I appreciate that the world of the emo and pop punk genres sort of embraced our band. But, you know, we certainly, you know, we've always been very vocal about this, that we certainly were never trying to be one of those types of bands by design. And, you know, with all due respect to some of those bands, are like you know, we become great friends with them because we toured with them. And when you look at Sugarcult up close and you look at a lot of the bands that we got lumped in with, you can probably see that there's a slight difference. The way our hair was, the way our clothes were, the way our, you know, there was maybe some things in common, but it was like, you really have to like, if you just give it this quick cursory glance, hear us on a playlist, you're just going to be like, yeah, just another one of those bands. But if you look, and I'm not saying we're better than that or anything, it's just I just always enjoy that we, we set out on a mission to just be a good American rock and roll band,
Yeah, absolutely.
You said like we weren't trying to be Tom Petty, but Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers were certainly like something when we were making our records. I would like bring that up as an example. I'm like, how when you hear a Tom Petty song, it never sounds like it's like, oh, this sounds so 70s or this sounds so 80s or this sounds so 90s. You just hear it and just like, that just sounds cool. Sounds
Yeah.
great. Put it on like if you're in your car, if you jump into a rental car and the radio station comes on and it's an American Girl comes on, there's no way you're not going to turn it up.
Right. Again, it's timeless. It's one of those
timeless.
things where it's not like a genre or a time frame. It's timeless. You wrote a song, even if it's just one song, like that one song will live on forever because it's gonna,
so.
I mean, I have a 1-year-old. She's gonna know it. You know what I mean? Like
man,
it's just one of those things that I'm sure millions of people around the world have done that already, and their children are growing up. That my daughter just turned 1 last week. And
amazing, dude. Congratulations.
Thank you. And it's one of those things where like, I try not to be a music snob, but I'm kind of a music snob, I guess. I don't know. But I'm like, I want her to grow up listening to the music that I want her to grow up listening to until she's old enough to make the decision for herself. But I mean, like putting on stuff that I hold near and dear to my heart. So like, it is one of those things, you know what I mean? So
that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, it's good parenting. Expose them to all kinds of stuff like that.
Absolutely.
No, that's awesome.
So
it's weird to think like that someone who's born today, like memory to someone born today is going to be like the same thing as like, the Beatles to somebody born in the 80s. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, that's wild. It's just wild how music culture goes.
Absolutely. So I had somebody reached out and wanted me to ask you, what was the idea behind covering the I Melt With You for the 80s, Punko's 80s soundtrack? Was there like a reasoning behind it specifically?
Well, we needed to do a song from the 80s, and I remember having an argument with Tim because I think that song was one of those songs like that might have been released in England in 1979, but in America in 1980. So it was like just makes the cut, And he's like, dude, most people are not as like, they're not as music snob, purist, record collector dude as you. Just go with it. 80s song. I'm like, whatever. And I think the song I love that song Melt With You, but I was like, I think I was gunning for, we used to cover for like 5 minutes. We covered, I think it's the song Kiss Off by Violent Femmes. Is that the one where they go one, cause you love me, and two, cause she loves me.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Anyway, y'all could just kiss off. Yeah, that's I think I wanted to do that. That was like in my head for that. And then I think I just lost the Rochambeau in the band. It was like I lost the vote. They were like, "No, we're gonna do Melt With You." And I'm like, "Okay, fine."
That's fine. It's still a great song.
But no, it's a great song. Yeah, that was a fun project. I still remember telling those people at the label that were doing those Punk Goes 80s, Punk Goes Metal, Punk Goes whatever. I told them that they needed to do one, and they still haven't done it. I was always telling them, you got to do one called Punk Goes Punk.
Yeah.
You get like modern bands, like you get like Pierce the Veil to do a Minor Threat song. And the Plain White Tees to do a Descendant song, like get like modern bands to do the 80s punk bands,
That's brilliant. That's a brilliant idea.
Punk Goes Punk. I was like, dude, come on.
It's right there.
It's right there. It's right. Come on. So I'm saying it right here, okay? If you guys are listening, it's not too late.
That's funny. So is there a favorite tour that you've done, and as far as like through any of the bands that you've played with, Sugarcult, any of the other ones? Like, is there any tours that stand out to you that were like your favorite band or your favorite tour rather, and why?
Oh man, I mean, there's so many tours. We toured for years nonstop. So there was just so many great tours, and there were so many tours that were fun for different reasons. Obviously your first tour is always going to be something where it's like, oh man, the first time we ever technically toured, which I guess you would define by going and playing a series of shows away from your hometown, was before we were even signed. It was in 2000. We literally I remember printing. This is before things were all done on websites, and we had to print out the application form for this thing they do in Austin, Texas called South by Southwest.
Yep.
And we printed it out and filled it out and sent in the check for $40 or whatever, sent in our 3-song demo, and just would check the mail every day. Oh man, did we get it? Did we get it? And we finally got it and opened it up at band practice. We were all like, oh man, I hope we got in. And we got in. It was like, no way, we got accepted to South by Southwest. And so then having, this was early on. This was, like I said, 2000. And then having to now are we going to get to, once the dust settled, we were like, how are we going to get to Austin? We don't have any money. No one has a car big enough to load our gear. We got to figure this out. So we just had to get super scrappy. And I had a friend, I knew this girl who I had gone to high school with who had moved to Austin, and I called her and she said we could crash at her house. And then we went to the local paper, the local entertainment paper, and I asked them if I could write a tour journal about our experience and then have it printed in their paper. And they said they pay me $150 for that. Mm-hmm. So we were like, we got $150, we got a place to stay. And then we went to a local, there was Balance Bar, which was the nutrition bars. They were based in Santa Barbara, nearby Santa Barbara. And we went to them and they said they'd sponsor us and give us $400 and a bunch of, in exchange for that, they would give us promotional little, small, sample sized bars to put out on the table, at our showcase that we were going to play. Mm-hmm. And of course we just ate all of those. And so we were like, okay, well, we got enough money now. We can, and I think our drummer was of age to rent a car. So we rented a car. We rented a minivan and stuffed all our stuff in it. And then we started to kind of hustle. We asked my friend in Austin if she knew anybody who knew a party we could play. So we got and then this guy surfaced that was interested in managing our band. Because we didn't have a manager at the time or anything. And we were kind of using it. We were like, well, let's use this as an opportunity to see how much baller he has in him, if he can make anything happen. So we were like, dude, try and let's just sort of test you out. What can you do for us in Texas? We're going to Texas. And he ended up getting us on a record store that was having a series of bands playing during the day at some at this place called Waterloo Records. We got to play on their patio, play a 3-song set. Then he got us a show in Houston and a show in Dallas, and then another show in Austin. So we had 3 shows in Austin, and then a show in Houston, a show in Dallas, and so we were like, okay, this is making it worth our trip out there. And we went and just had to get super scrappy playing, shows. We stayed at my friend's house, and she had a big welcoming party for us. So we met all the locals in Austin, all the weirdos and artists and tattoo people and, musicians. And they all kind of, befriended us and came out to our shows. And we just had this, I don't know how it happened, but we played our show and it just became the place to be. Because we knew a lot of the locals through my friend. Mm-hmm. And so all these locals were there. We put them all on the guest list, and CNN showed up, and MTV News, all these people just kind of were whoa, what's going on over there? And we just we just kind of made an impression, and that ended up inadvertently probably leading to us getting a record deal, because
that's crazy.
We were an unknown band that got a bunch of press. And so we ended up getting that guy to be our manager, because we're like, well, you kind of proved yourself. Mm-hmm. And then, just within a year, we had a record deal. And I think February 1st of 2001, I quit my job working at a record store and moved to LA. And we went to the studio in April, I think, and started making Start Static, and that was that. The rest of the history. We started, Warped Tour was June of 2001, so it was just all it was felt like a Cinderella story, almost like session, like things just started to line up. But so that first tour was really, I mean, it wasn't really a tour. It was just sort of us booking a hodgepodge series of shows. But then we got the Warped Tour 2001, and that was a kind of a fun story with that, in that they offered us 11 shows on like the small stage, and my friend had been on the Warped Tour before, and he's like, dude, the Warped Tour is a different culture. It's like, it's very like pirate ship on the open seas. Like, you just got to be cool, and like kind of anything goes. So just be cool, be a model citizen, say please and thank you, and show that you're hardworking. And if Kevin Lyman takes a liking to you, you're good to go. And so we just went on the Warped Tour, and we're like, let's just be cool, and let's play our hearts out every night, and let's be nice to everybody, and let's not be high maintenance. Let's not complain about stuff. Let's just, and we just did it. And the next thing you know, Kevin was offering us, he's like, hey, everyone seems to really like you guys, and the kids are digging your show. So would you guys want to stay on the whole tour? And we were like, hell yeah, let's go. And they ended up inviting us to stay on the whole tour. But the one caveat, which was kind of funny, is that they said, we can't promise you what stage you're going to play on, but we'll find somewhere for you to play. And the place we played probably the most often was what they called the Ladies Lounge, which was a stage they had set up for like girl artists.
Okay.
It was like female DJ, a female band. It was, we had the distinction of being the only all male band on the female stage.
It could have been worse. Could have been the silent disco they do or ended up doing.
Exactly right. You got to put your headphones on here. So I was like, we're literally just like up there going, yeah, there's a bunch of breast cancer awareness information over there, and there's like free tampons and girls. Yeah,
that's funny.
We did have a lot of female. We had a pretty big audience of female fans, and I probably attribute it to that. Like, Mel, it's probably like because we were like the boy band on the girls' stage.
I'm sure it helped.
Yeah, I'm sure it helped, and the single guys in our band at the time had a lot of fun with that. So, yeah. But that was wild on the early Warped Tour, because they would because it's really hard to do the Warped Tour in a van. So what they do is they'll have these like really old like vintage tour buses that you can like pool in with a couple other bands on, and basically ends up being like more cost effective than having a van. So we shared it. We applied to be on one of those buses, and you don't know who you're going to get to share it with. And we ended up sharing it with an all-girl band called Lowball, whose singer would go on to be like a big actress. Her name's Polly Perrette, and she was like on that show. Like, I don't watch any of those shows, but like I think it was called CSI, like one of those types of crime shows. She was like the goth chick on one of those crime shows. Yeah. And she was the singer of the band they were sharing that bus with us. And then there was another band from Australia called, oh God, what were they called? My brain, I can't remember what they were called. They were such cool dudes. Why can't I remember? It'll pop in my head eventually. Oh my God, Australian band. Why can't I remember what they're called? Anyway, so it was like these Australian guys and these LA girls and us sharing a bus. And then at some point, one of the bands got replaced by Midtown. So we had this band from New Jersey sharing the bus with us. And then, it was pretty wild. So you have like, probably like 18 people on one bus. So you're just like, it's pretty awesome. So that was 2001. 2002, we did the same thing. We were on the Warped Tour, but we were on a slightly bigger stage. And we shared the bus with a band from Israel called Useless ID, who are all like, I guess everyone in Israel is ex-military because they have to do service or something. But they all were these like super political punk rock dudes with like dreadlocks, and they were called Useless ID. They're on Fat Records. And then the other band were these like kids, like the singer was 19 years old, and they were from Utah, and they were all like Mormons pretty much, and they were called The Used. And they
really
put out their first record, and we had met them when they were still a local band back in 2001. Because after the Warped Tour, we went on tour with Goldfinger and Real Big Fish. It was one of the first tours we ever got on, and John from Goldfinger was kind of like, he was kind of grooming the used to hopefully sign them and produce them, because he had known them since like they were like super young, and they were like maybe in a ska punk band, and then eventually evolved into what became the Used. When we met them, they were just called Used, and they had gotten their name from taking a Refused sticker and cutting off the REF, so it just said Used. And then once they got signed, they changed it to The Used. But they were like a local band, and I remember they played, and then we played, and then we were sharing a dressing room with them when we opened for Goldfinger and Real Big Fish, and we were like the two young opening bands. So we got to know them, and they were just super cool. But they were so young. They were like out there, like they're like, we got to go out into the audience now and ask for money, because they weren't getting paid, because they were just local bands. So they had like a pitcher, like a plastic pitcher that said like donations, and they were going out and have people like stuffing money in it. I was like, that's so awesome. Anyway, so a year later, we're sharing a bus with them, and now they're signed to a big label, and they have this record, and we thought the record was a masterpiece. And I think most people would agree that first Used record is a total masterpiece. But interesting to be sharing a bus with them as that was happening, because they were still like a small band, but the record was starting to get out there, and you watch their shows just like progressively throughout the summer get bigger and bigger and bigger. And the guys in the band were just like the sweetest kids. But they were just like, I mean, you knew that singer Bert was like born to be a star. Like he was,
for sure.
But he's, at the end of the day, he's still just this like awkward, complicated kid trying to navigate being, having this like, and his microphone just kept getting louder and louder. And it was like, is this guy going to be able to handle this? This is pretty gnarly. He's like the real thing, he's not, he can't, he doesn't have a control knob. Like he puts his whole everything into every time he plays, and you watched him blow up. So that was really interesting to be on a bus with like dudes from Israel with dreadlocks and dudes from Utah, and then you got us. And we all got along. Like it was such a good vibe. To me, it's like I always say, with like all the crazy things going on in the world, you're like, you know what, all you got to do is share a tour bus together, and it's like a microcosm, and you're like people who have totally different worldviews, totally different backgrounds, totally different cultural norms and traditions, and you just throw them on a bus together, and they're like, and you're going to find a way to get along. We got along.
Do you have any unusual or funny stories from tours that you can remember that come to mind?
I mean, those things, but there was a tour. We actually toured with, we did sort of a co-headlining tour with a band that, like I said, I had played in for a little while, called the Ataris, but they were like, had blown up now and had the hit song on the radio. And we went out and did a tour with them all across America. And it was fun because we, both two bands kind of grew out of the Santa Barbara scene, and we're on tour together. But I remember there was a show where our singer, like the doors were already open, and there was a few bands that played earlier. And he had been taking a nap or something, and he woke up and realized he had lost his voice, but it was like too late to like cancel the show and like offer people refunds. So it was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? He like lost his voice. We like took him to a urgent care, and they were like, yeah, I don't know what to do. Like he was just like, oh yeah, like he could not talk, couldn't sing. And so we were like, oh my God, we have to play the show without our singer singing. So we had enough time to like kind of put the word out, and like got like one of the guys in the Ataris to sing a song, got our merch girl, Michelle, to sing a song. I think I sang a song. Like we just basically got people from all the opening bands to sing, and then had the audience kind of sing. And so basically I went and got like, I think we were getting paid maybe $500 a night at that point, or maybe $1,000 a night. And I went and got all of it in $1 bills.
Oh,
I got it changed from the bar into $1 bills. And we went out to the crowd, and we just went, hey, you guys, so here's the good news and bad news. The bad news is our singer lost his voice. So we can't have him sing. So you guys are going to have to sing tonight. We're just going to play Sugarcult. We're going to play the songs, and you guys are going to have to help us sing. And some people from the other bands are going to help sing. I'm like, and the good news is, because we're not going to be able to give you the show the way we're supposed to. We're going to pay you guys back our share of the money tonight. And so we just, all four of us sat there and just like made it rain and just threw like handfuls. It felt so liberating to just throw like $1,000 in dollar bills out into the crowd. And I wish someone found video. It was so fun. And people were just grabbing it. And then afterwards they're having us like autograph the dollars. And
That's awesome.
Yeah, so we were just like, you know what, man, we'll pay you back at least our share of it. And then we did it, and it was a fun show. So that was wild.
That is wild.
I mean, there's a million that are going to pop in my head like later on today when I'm done talking to you. I'm going to be like, oh, I'm such an idiot. Why didn't I tell him that story? But I mean, this is, I have to say, like, probably the gnarliest tour. I mean, we got to tour with Blink and play arenas in Europe, that's a pretty good story, actually, because we were like thinking we were going to be home for the holidays. Like, it was like, all right, we've been touring like crazy. It's been a crazy year. Now it's December and we're home, go like hang out with our friends and family. And then we get this call from our manager, and he's like, okay, dude, Death Cab for Cutie was supposed to open for Blink in England and Northern Europe for an arena tour, but their singer lost his voice. Up with you singers and your voices. And he's on vocal rest, and they have to basically replace them. And they need to do it like now. Like, you guys got to tell us yes or no, can you do it? But the thing is, like, the budget's pretty small, and we're going to have to go like skeleton crew. Like, we're not gonna be able to bring our whole crew. We're going to have to find a way to make it work. We're probably going to go into the red. It's probably going to cost us money to do this tour, because by the time we like fly out there, tour bus and all the things, it's going to be pretty, but we were like, dude, we can't not, we can't like say no to opening for Blink 182 on a arena tour in Europe. And so we're like, we're going to make it work. And you just go back to that, like, scrappy, that's where like having like years of being a punk rock band or being a local band just really come into play. Like, even at that level, we were just like, I'm like, dude, I'm going to text Mark from Blink and ask him if we can eat their catering. And he's like, of course, you guys can eat whatever you want, And then we got in touch with Travis's people, and they were like, okay, well, Travis is some band he's supporting on his label he was starting or whatever, this band called the Kinnison. He's like, they will share a tour bus with you guys, so we can split the cost of that. And then we like shared a sound engineer with them, so we were able to split the cost of that. And we just found a way, like, brought like I think we brought one tech instead of two techs. We brought our tour manager, and like, we just kept it really humble and small. And then just like, I think a friend in England was able to hook us up with some amps, we just same thing as when we had to do that thing in Austin, Texas. You just make it work somehow. And the next thing you know, we're in Europe. And of course, everything worked out great. Blink, the first day, they're like, you guys, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We have our own like mobile, catering service coming with us on this whole tour. You guys eat with us. Totally don't worry about it. You don't have to pay for any of it. We had plenty to drink. They were all, Travis is always like bringing us like bottles of Dom Perignon, and, just like, they were the nicest guys, and so generous. And we got to tour, and we got to play Wembley. We got to play like,
that's wild.
I mean, it was wild. Yeah, somewhere on my Instagram feed, you see like a picture of me with Robert Smith from The Cure, and I tell the story about how like he was there to sing a song with Blink at their London shows, and so I got to like hang with him and like drink a bottle of wine with him, which was pretty incredible.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that tour was amazing. The two biggest tours we ever did were probably that one in Europe with Blink, and then getting to do, this is a really cool story too. I've told this a million times, so people who've listened to me on podcasts are like, dude, that story, we've heard it. But like, we got to tour with Green Day on the American Idiot tour, and that was pretty, because we were, like I said, we were on the Warped Tour the summer of 2004, and early on in the tour, we got this call from our, team that was like, okay, don't get your hopes up. It's nothing set in stone. It's not for sure, but you're on the short list. As it turns out, you're on the short list for, we just got contacted from Green Day's people, and they said, you're on the short list of bands they're looking at to open for this tour they're doing later in the year. And so, of course, every day we're just calling our manager, like, do we get the tour? Do we get the tour? Like, we're like the little kids going, are we there yet? And And so, like, and the other band that was going to be on the tour would be Newfound Glory. So they were on the Warped Tour with us. So we'd like go over to like where their bus was set up and be like, dude, what's up? We might be touring with you guys. We're trying not to jinx it, but like, and there was a few other bands that were in the running. And so we were just like, is there anything we can do to influence them? Is there anything? We're like, no, they have to make the decision. And so eventually we got the call and they're like, yeah, they chose you guys.
That's awesome.
And which was awesome. And we got to go on that tour and they were just like, again, Green Day they'd sort of fallen out of fashion a little bit. But I think that when they did that tour with Blink and Jimmy World, they called it the Pop Disaster Tour. I think it kind of reintroduced them to like another generation of people that, maybe didn't get to see them in the 90s. And they were like, oh, these guys are pretty cool. But then they made that record, American Idiot, to a lot of people in like, I talk to people that are in their 20s or early 30s, and they're like, to those people, American Idiot was the first Green Day record.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course, to me, it's like, I've already been a Green Day fan before Dookie even came out.
Yeah.
But like, but to, people that are from younger generations, like American Idiot, like if you talk to like, Billie Eilish's brother Phineas, he'll say like, American Idiot was like the first record he got into as a like 8-year-old,
Wow.
I was just talking to somebody the other day too. So yeah, so it was like, it was like to watch those guys just get to know them as people, but to watch them every night play, and you just saw that record starting to get bigger and bigger. And like, you just watched it blow up. Like the arenas were starting to be full and you watched that band like become an arena band. And I mean, I'm going to see them next month play a stadium, but like, it was pretty remarkable. And then, the fun thing was like in the middle of that tour, their singer like was standing on the side of the stage while we were playing. And he was like, I see him writing something, and he hands it to our guitar tech, who runs out and puts it down by our singer's feet. And our singer looks down at it like in between songs and he picks it up. He walks over to me and shows it to me. And it basically said, you guys want to go to Japan with us? So
That's amazing.
Which was kind of cool. Like he just like on stage asked us to like invited us to go and tour with them in Japan.
Yeah. So
what? It's amazing.
I'm sorry. What is like, what's crossing your mind when you're on a stage of that size in front of that many people? Like what's going through your head?
Me personally, what's going through my head is thinking about like the first show I ever played, like when I was 15 years old in a tiny little rented out like community space in Santa Barbara,
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about all the driveways I played, thinking about all the dive bars I played, thinking about all those little like, and then you realize like all of this is like, this is just the culmination of like so many years of just like schlepping your gear, playing in front of 2 people, trying to hustle to get some show on a Tuesday night, 3 hours away, and then getting there and having it be a total disaster. Like all the all the misfires, all the things and it was just one of those things where it was like, when you get to that thing and you're playing like in front of crowds that big, in rooms that big, it's kind of surreal. I mean, honestly, it's probably more intimidating to play a small space because you're so much more intimate. You're like, people are right in front of you. Like if you're playing like, a place that doesn't have a security barricade or anything, it's just like, that feels more, I don't know. It's really weird. It's weird when you're playing those big things. It's just, I guess what's going through your head is also like, don't mess up.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you don't want to let that nervousness consume you, because then you're not going to play a fun show. So it's more about like, don't mess up, but if you do mess up, it's okay, because no one knows how these songs are supposed to go. What's more important is that you work the whole stage, you put on a really fun show.
Absolutely.
So, and you also just, what's definitely going through your head is you never know when you're going to get to, when and if you're ever going to get to do this again. So like, make sure you appreciate it and like take it all in and like look out there and like, kind of enjoy the experience,
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to ask one more thing.
Yeah.
If you, what are you, let me see how I want to word this. Sorry. What do you want your mark to be left as in music? Like if, you stopped doing any more music today, never to write another song never to play another show, what is the mark that you hope to leave behind on the music industry and the music realm, I guess?
I mean, I don't know. I think, I just think we weren't trying to change the world. We were just trying to honor the sort of tradition of being a four-piece rock band with guitar and bass and drums and making up some songs, and and so it's not like, it's just like it's like, to me, it's like owning a restaurant and just being like, I don't know, we're not going to be maybe you're not going to be like the best pizza place in the world, but to people that love your pizza place, you're their favorite pizza place. To the locals that live nearby, you're the place where their memories are being made. So I guess that's the best you can hope for as a band, is that you mean something in you provided this soundtrack. You provided part of the soundtrack to the lives of the people that were your fans, or not necessarily even our fans. There's people out there that like our songs that don't even know who the hell Sugarcult is. They've been listening. Memory's been on, coming on shuffle on their playlist for years, and they just like that song Memory, or they like that song Pretty Girl. They could, care less that there's a guy named Marko or a guy named Tim or Aaron or Kenny or Ben involved in it. They just like that song,
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where you're just like, you just hope that that your music meant something to the people it meant something to, and provided the soundtrack to their lives. Like you have people who are like, yo, I played your song, like you said, played your song for my baby. People who had your song, a song that you were part of at their wedding. People that listened to, I had people come up to me when we tour and like be crying and telling me that our music got them through really like dark times in their lives, got them through everything from breakups to like depression and families breaking up, or like so like you realize the power of music, and it's just kind of fun to be part of it, and it's like it's in a way, I mean, it's very self-indulgent. You're up on stage jumping around and showing off in front of people, and you're putting music out to people, but it's in a way, it's also, you're also just sort of a first responder in a way, to like, you're putting your music out and then hoping that someone cares, but you're not making it so people will care. I mean, you're checking your tuning to make sure it's in tune before you record it for the rest of time. But, it's more like you're just doing it. Like I said, it's kind of a labor of love. You just do it. And then if and when people care about it, you hope that they share it with other people, and then it kind of takes on a life of its own, which I think some of our songs have done, which is really cool. I don't know. That's a weird question. It's a good question.
Answer. It's a great answer, though. It's
okay.
It's,
good. I wish I thought about that more in advance, but I think that's what you can hope for, is that your music has like meant something in somebody's lives. And who knows, maybe it'll continue on, or maybe someone will cover it in 50 years.
Right.
And it'll mean something to someone again. But by then it's going to be very far removed from me having anything to do with it. So,
Marko, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Is there anything that you want to promote or have the people check out?
No, not really. I mean, we're just kind of chilling right now. But I would love to, if people want to, I'm pretty active on Instagram. If you want to find me on Instagram, just like maybe throw in your thing so people can see how to spell my name. It's just MarkoDesantis, and that's my handle on Instagram. I usually get back to people if they have any questions about the band or whatever. So feel free to DM me. Hopefully some way, shape, or form we'll get back out there at some point. And yeah,
fingers crossed. Are you guys gonna have this record out on vinyl ever?
Oh man, I was afraid you were gonna ask that question. Unfortunately, we can't put Palm Trees out on vinyl right now for really boring, legally types of reasons, which is so annoying. But it's just one of those things where it's the music business, not the music friends. So. Unfortunately, we're not able to do it yet, but hopefully someday. And trust me, we all want to do it. But I will say, actually, this is something. Check sugarcult.com, check our website, and check my Instagram, because I'm probably the most active as far as like outreach with fans. Because one thing we are trying to work on right now is 20th anniversary merch drop for Palm Trees and Power Lines. So
Very
like
cool.
sort of doing a Palm Trees merch capsule, because right now there's not any of that stuff available to people. If you're like a Sugarcult super fan, hit me up. I've got a bunch of cool stuff and I'll send it to you.
Very cool. All right. Thanks again, man. I appreciate it. I'd love to have you back on maybe in the future sometime.
Anytime, man. It's
Awesome.
It's great talking to you, and thank you so much for giving me for giving our band support, and good luck with your 1-year-old daughter. That's so exciting.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Again, thank you so much for coming on the show. Everybody, thank you for sticking around, watching, listening. Let us know what you think about the episode down below. Everything Marko, all of his social media will be down below. You can find him on there. It'll be down in the links and everything. And yeah, we'll see you next week.
Bye, bitch.